to Season 6 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, lifelong helper, and your host. I've been interviewing modern-day heroes for over a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to be sharing these inspiring conversations with our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Do you remember what it felt like during COVID to be isolated away from your family and alone and missing your friends? That feeling that we all felt? Well, today's guest is no stranger to this because for the past 20 years, she's been working with isolated seniors in a really amazing way. Rachel Doyle is the founder of GlamourGals, who brings seniors and teens together, an incredible nonprofit. I'm really excited to share her amazing journey and our incredible conversation about how she's making an amazing difference in our world. We're so excited to have Rachel Doyle here today of GlamourGals. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited. So let's just jump right in. And why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what GlamourGals does?
Absolutely. For over 20 years, we've been empowering beautiful connections between generations. And we do this by organizing teen volunteer chapters in high school and college to visit local senior homes to provide companionship, conversation, and our signature programming of complimentary beauty makeovers. And our real vision is, of course, to end elder loneliness.
Beautiful. And there's a lot of that. There is a lot of that in this world. I think we forget so often what happens to, our grandparents and our neighbors that get sent away to a senior home and people aren't visiting. And I think
pre-pandemic, I would stand on my soapbox and I would say, over 50% of seniors in care are not visited. And people would be like, oh, that's horrible. And then the pandemic came along and we stood on our soapbox and said, 100%. I mean, it was dire.
Right. Oh.
But you know what? It was so dire that it finally became present in people's minds to understand how corrosive, the lack of human connection is. Before pandemic, everybody used to say to me, oh, Rachel, that's so nice what you do. Now, after we've lived through collectively being isolated, for a week, a month, maybe a couple months, but it was temporary for most of us. We have felt how dire it can feel to be alone. Right. And then now it's incredible how much the public has been educated that when I approach people about what we do with GlamourGals, they get it. They're like, I get it. I want to help. I want to be a part of this. So there was a little bit of a silver lining through that insane time we went through as an organization, as someone who had to educate so many people on our mission. And then afterwards, the education has been done. And now it's just having the resources to mobilize the people.
Right. Because we all felt it. We all felt it. We did have the collective experience. And most of us had never felt isolated before. Most of us hadn't felt lonely before. Most of us hadn't missed our friends or our family before.
I mean, when you're denied the basic things like a hug,
right?
You couldn't touch, you couldn't even shake hands.
Right.
So, it's incredible how much human connection is so important to not only community on a broader scale, but also, it starts with conversations and connecting. And that is how ultimately people make policy or, you create laws. You have to talk about things. You have to be able to, connect with people who are not like you. And going back to the core of what we do and how we've been doing it. And it's all about connecting with people who maybe are not like you. It's, you bring a teenager and a senior citizen together. There's some similarities, but there are definitely plenty of things that are not the same.
But it's a way for them to learn from each other. And what I love about this too, about you and your story, which we're going to get to a little bit, is I work with youth. I work with a youth leadership organization. I work with amazing kids, and I see the potential of what kids can do, what a teenager can do to make a difference. I see it in my work every day. You see it in your work every day. The world doesn't see that. The world sees on TV street gangs attacking FedEx trucks or thugs or whatever. They don't see the goodness, and we're not showing this amazing thing that our kids are doing.
Absolutely. And, I created GlamourGals when I was a teenager. And it was an idea, it was in honor of my grandmother who had passed away. I wanted to do something that honored her. But being a teenager, I wanted to do something I enjoy.
Right.
And I think where the success comes in is this idea of tapping into what's relevant to your audience. And
right.
I loved fashion, beauty, and makeup. So I thought, why not take the things that I love, my friends love, and use it as a tool to make someone smile? So the GlamourGals makeover experience, although we give beauty makeovers, applying rouge to someone's cheeks or a lipstick color or cleansing the face, we don't touch the hair,
right.
Painting the nails. It's just a vehicle for conversation that's familiar.
Right.
And when you can tap into things that are relevant or even provide opportunities for teens to do something and put their own spin on it. I think that's what I'm most proud about. How we built the organization is through this chapter system that allows, yes, it starts with the manicures and makeovers, the GG signature programming, but then we give the leadership, the teen leadership of the chapters, flexibility through our chapter creativity fund, where if they have an idea that extends the time in the senior home, we're like, pitch us your idea and we'll give you the materials to go and do that. And so they can own a little bit of their local ideas.
Right.
And going one step further, you talked about how all we see on the news, it used to be, as a kid, I'm dating myself, the 5 o'clock news, what awful thing the teenagers have done today.
Right.
I said, why can't we ever celebrate like the good stuff? Like the good kids, like, there's a lot of cool, good kids, but nobody ever gets celebrated for that. So I actually created 20 years ago, the Glammy Awards, which are now the Glammy Scholarship Awards, that celebrate the outstanding service. And we even were able to partner with St. Peter's University. So we have democratized service and scholarship, where anyone in our organization, if they have a certain grade point average and they are a GlamourGals volunteer, they can get a full ride, full ride to college. And, if you think about, okay, mostly you get a full ride if you're in sports, but you have to be like the number one sports person.
Right.
Whereas volunteering, anyone can volunteer. So it gives, the student who maybe, says, I can't do service because I need that after school job to pay for college one day.
Right.
If I lean into this service, I have the opportunity to go to college for free.
That's
amazing. I think that is powerful.
Oh, it's incredible.
So,
I love that.
That may not be the only incentive for people to join, but it's one. So and if that's then why not?
So how old were you when you started GlamourGals? Were you in your teens?
Yes, I was in high school. I remember it was August of 1999 that I was thinking of the idea, and it was January of 2000. I was about to say 2020, and I'm like, no, it's January 2000. It's been a while. In January of 2000, I held my very first GlamourGals makeover, and I invited or begged 2 friends from homeroom, talking about will you like makeup? You need this for college, don't you? And I dragged them into the senior home that day. And I remember I was unprepared for the next question, which after the experience, they turned to me and said, hey, when are we coming back? And I'm a teenager. I didn't think about, we can come back, right? I think I was so worried about it going off well the first time. And then, from then on, it just, continued. It turned out the senior home that we went to put out a press release.
Oh, wow.
No idea what that was. And so, when we got to the volunteer time, and there was more press than there were volunteers. The New York Times had sent someone, 3 local newspapers.
Oh my gosh.
At the time I was on a live television show in New York, and they allowed me to take a camera. So I got my friend Steve, shout out to Steve, TV now. He's a legit TV guy. He had to start with me. He held the video camera, and we filmed the very first GlamourGals makeover for television. So we actually have that on our YouTube channel.
Oh, I love that. So did you grow up in a really philanthropic family? Did you have family that showed you giving back? Were you volunteering always? I mean, what because I don't think you just wake up and say, I'm going to do this work. Obviously, your story, you know, your grandmother, you did your thing, but there's pieces that kind of lead up to that.
I think I was always very civic minded, but I definitely think, I can reflect on it now and say my parents were educators. So around the dinner table, we always heard about the importance of learning and teaching and growing and caring for other people. Like my parents would be the first ones to say someone's sick, you make them chicken soup and you bring it to them. You don't ask
Right.
questions.
Right.
Somebody needs a coat, you find a coat, you bring it to them. And you know what,
Right.
to this day, they are the Uber volunteers. And for years, we didn't have business connections. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. My
Right.
dad worked with mentally ill communities. So what they had was a passion for hard work and drive, and instilling that in both my brother and I, the idea that whatever they could give, if it was a ride or time
Right.
or their literally, they have done everything from stuff gift bags to mail packages to drive me places. They helped make that happen.
Right.
And then it was their belief in me to say, okay, we'll go figure it out. So very early on, before we had all this wonderful technology that makes things so much quicker and easier,
Right.
when I didn't have products for the makeovers, I would just cold call and pitch people out of the yellow pages.
Oh my gosh.
Or I would.
You don't look that old, Rachel.
I know, right? Yellow. Well, I'm going to give you some goodies. I'm going to be like dropping things. People are going to be like, what is that? That's like not a doorstop.
A yellow page?
We don't like the holiday fire, Jimmy.
Oh
with that.
my gosh.
So the yellow pages, or, at one point I remember I needed the help of a lawyer. And I remember going in, and that's when I remember there was a Google, like I Googled the top 10 law firms and I just called them up. I literally just called up law firms one afternoon, and I had my pitch down, I guess, before I knew what a pitch was. I knew my phone pitch, but I was compelling enough to the ladies who were
answer the phone, right?
And everybody would be like, wait a minute, what's your number? Because I think my niece what my daughter needs to know. So they would be taking my number, like, I'm going to get you. And I remember it would be like switchboards that sent the desks of people. So, I think it was, definitely I owe a lot to my family. They were my first board of directors, and, who's around your dinner table.
Right.
I remember a funny story about that. Our first board minutes, that when I finally got the pro bono lawyer, she read over the minutes and she said, your father's not on the board, but he's in the board minutes. I said, well, he made a comment, and we were doing the board meeting at the dinner table. So they're like, okay, well, you have to invite him as a guest, moments like that. Or I had, when I built an advisory council, and I had my very first advisory council meeting in college in a phone booth in a broom closet between classes, because that was the only quiet place. So, on this entrepreneurial journey, I think the common thread is just making things happen in any situation.
So talk to me about the challenges of making things happen, because, at the end of the day, nonprofit founders are entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs. We're starting a business that relies on the kindness of others, which is a really hard business model. Raising money is hard. Doing all this work is hard. Being an entrepreneur of any type is hard. So what were some of the biggest challenges early on?
I think in any entrepreneurial journey, they're consistent. There's always, you need resources, but you need the right resources at the right time. You need the right people at the right time. I think it's not necessarily the challenges, it's how you move through them, because challenges will come up daily. I mean, if you don't want to be faced with a challenge that you have no one else to turn to in the room and say, can you figure this out? The buck stops with you.
Right.
Then I don't recommend being an entrepreneur. You have to embrace that lifestyle choice, and not get heartburn or not get paralyzed or not enjoy it. And I think that as a person, I've discovered that I don't mind a challenge. I lean into it. I see it. There's a positive to it, even if it's not the outcome that I want, but it keeps you moving forward. And, as again, it's funny because I'm a mom of 2 young children, and the parenting stuff that's always invading your Instagram feeds are always about, kids and their emotions. And you can't stop emotions from happening in any place.
Right.
You can manage your way through them.
Or your reaction.
To them. And that is the entrepreneurial experience, where you have fires all the time. And it's that fireman model or firewoman model.
Right.
How do they get out of a burning building? They look down at their feet and they go one step in front of the other. And before you know it, you're out.
Right.
And that's what you have to do. So.
And it's true. And I think that the obstacle is the way. There's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way. And I think when you are an entrepreneur, they're there every day. And we have to realize that so oftentimes those challenges are gifts, because each obstacle is a lesson and as a hurdle you overcome. And then it's in the rearview mirror. And then there's another one, and that's just the way it is. So what fuels you? You mentioned you have small kids. We still have laundry and we have kids. And when I was starting the nonprofit that I started in 2002, the Spiritual Care Guild, my kids were 5, 6, and 1. And I remember thinking, like, days that I had one in diapers and I had kindergarten admission or drop off, and trying to start a nonprofit and thinking, how is this going to happen? There are days sometimes, it's life happens and you're running this business, and what fuels you to kind of keep going when those days that are harder?
Well, kudos to you. Hats off, because I tell this even to friends, girlfriends who have young kids and are trying to keep the job outside of the home, because I do think motherhood is a job, and just
it is.
Get paid for it. You get paid in other ways. And they take the fuel, but you have to somehow enjoy those moments and taste them.
Yes.
And childhood isn't forever. So you have to, in those really tough moments, at least personally, what really drove me was I had my son, he's older than my daughter. And I always said, I want my son to be old enough and one day turn to someone at dinner or out and just say, I want to be just like my mom. She's an entrepreneur. She's built something. She's got like this business mind, because your kids, of course, as a mom, see you in a totally different way usually.
Right.
And hey, listen, we love my husband. We love that, but motherhood is a lot more to-do lists in our society. And that's a society thing that we still haven't hacked.
Right.
This idea. So personally, what kept me going is that I want, when my child is old enough, to not just be proud of dad's work, but to be proud of like mom's work, and to say, I want to be like mom. So that's a personal driver. A professional driver, in our leadership model for our teens, we give them the opportunity to reflectively journal. They just know it as journaling. We sometimes reflectively to them. But the idea is that, they go out and do this incredible intergenerational experience, and they come back and get training and mentorship from us, best friend and biggest advocate, GG National. And then we give them the chance to write about it and reflect about it. And we prompt them to do that all the time. And we've collected thousands, actually over 10,000 reflective journals.
Wow.
And we share them as an office. We share them on social media to inspire others. And receiving those is really what drives me, because on the days where I'm like, am I doing something that still makes an impact? After 24 years, you question yourself, like, am I really doing something relevant? And, when that girl in Ohio or that guy in Texas, when they write about how much GlamourGals has transformed their life personally, academically, alumni who write professionally about it or come back to volunteer, or just all these stories that we amass, that it's not my journey anymore. It's thousands of other people's journeys. That is just so cool to me. That is just so inspiring. And usually at the times where I'm like tapping on your keyboard going like, I am so done today.
Right.
Get that email and you go, this is why.
Yep. That's why we do this. Because we get paid in other ways. We get paid in ways that are so much bigger. We certainly don't do this work for the money. We we do it for other things. But talk to me about impact, because I always say I have a love-hate relationship with that word in the nonprofit space, especially because how do you measure changing a child's life? How do you measure feeling loneliness with someone who hasn't had a visitor or had someone hold their hand? You can't measure that impact. But we always have to give our ROI. We always have to give, our donors, or, what is our impact, or our foundations that are supporting us, that information. So what would you say your impact's been, whether it's numbers, a story? How would you measure your impact?
We measure impact in a couple different ways because, like you said, how do you measure impact in relationship building? Like GlamourGals has always been about human connection.
Right.
So for 20 years, I think those reflective journals, we had an AI group run all these like fancy technology tests and look for keywords and all that. And we found actually during the pandemic, the most popular word in the reflective journals was hope, which to us signaled something really incredible, is that during the largest mental health crisis for teenagers, they were coming onto our site and talking about hope.
Wow.
And I think there is something really transforming there, in terms of the stories that we've amassed. And, yes, there are other very worthy organizations that have metrics that are just so based on numbers. And
Right.
we have this too. Like in the last couple months, we started 20 new chapters. We're in a growth period right now. When we went from, 100 communities of chapters pre-pandemic, March 2020, everything shut down, senior homes doors closed, teens couldn't go to school. We reached out to our community, our teens and senior homes, and said, how are you doing? What can we do together? And how can we move forward? And in 7 days, even less than a week, we pivoted to a whole new host of programming that kept our mission of connecting generations going. We tried anything and everything. It's a great cocktail conversation for us, but one of the programs we launched was called My Dear Friend. And it was a kind card writing program that allowed us to write cards to the seniors in the senior homes for them to receive something tangible during a time where the information had to be maybe slipped underneath the door because it was 100% isolation. Right. And since the launch of that program, we have distributed around the country and even the world in some foreign cities 100,000 cards.
Wow.
I think that speaks to how we run our organization, because in a time of crisis, instead of closing our doors and folding back when everybody said, oh, well, you're out of business now. I said, absolutely not. We've never been busier.
Right.
We had thousands of virtual volunteers walk through our doors and participate in this program. We expanded our community outreach in the millions with press coverage and awards for this program. I think it showed you the infrastructure we had created in an organization that during a crisis, we actually were able to pivot quickly, serve even more people, and show those metrics, those traditional metrics. Now we have continued this campaign. It's so successful. We hope to reach 30,000 seniors, isolated seniors, this holiday season in about 2 months in all 50 states. So I think we can show this balance of when you need us to do something metric, numbers related, we got you. Right. But going back to the core of our program, human relationships, creating, for teens, transformations that inspire their personal, academic, and future professional success through anecdotal stories. We've got thousands of those too.
That's beautiful. And how many chapters do you guys have across the country?
Right now, 89, although I feel like by the end of the day, it could be 90. And I like to say communities because we have, chapters in Staten Island that might be one high school chapter going to 4 different senior home locations. Or in rural, Tennessee, it might be 2 high schools coming together, or a college campus, going to one senior home. It just depends on the community. because GlamourGals goes from the cafeteria lunch table to the dinner table to the conference room table to the, activities room table. The conversation continues,
I love
throughout
that.
the community.
So if you could dream any dream, because you can't be an entrepreneur without a dream. The dream is what got you here. The vision is what got you started down this path all those years ago. What is the big dream for GlamourGals? We talk about growth and expansion. I mean, every person I've ever interviewed, almost every single one, just wanted to help one person when they started. They didn't start out with any huge thinking about 90 chapters. They didn't think about 30,000 or 100,000 letters. They didn't think about everyone I've ever interviewed something happened to one person they cared about, and they wanted to make sure it didn't happen to the next person. I mean, that seems to be the theme with the hundreds of nonprofit founders I've been interviewing for the past decade. And so I'm always, all of us always just, start with one, but then all of a sudden the dream grows, right? We help more people, and then we want to help more, and we can't help ourselves. We can't stop. So what is the big dream?
I think the big dream for me, or, the thing that would make me the proudest for GlamourGals, is having the vision realized in rooms where I'm not present. Because I think, you can talk about growth or replication, or that you want to be in all 50 states, or you want this to be there. But it goes back to the people who are building it and meeting those goals. And when those people can perform their tasks or their goals in a way that embodies, your belief system, your vision without you and without your direct direction, that is the biggest compliment. For the first time probably ever, we hosted an event, a fundraising event, even without me. And at first I felt like really weird not being there.
Right.
And it wasn't a huge event,
right,
but it had a decent amount of important people that could be very pivotal to the organization. But I said, it's a good time to test drive this dream that I have, because as I like calculated risk. So I like calculated risk. So I can have lots of dreams, but I like to be successful at them. So a pilot test is not a bad thing.
Right.
So this fall, we held an event, and it was great. And there was things that can be more perfect or whatever. You can always pick anything apart. I think entrepreneurs are great at that. You see all the things that you could have done better, but that's why things grow and get better with entrepreneurs, because we have that side of ourselves too. But also you can appreciate things.
Good for you. That's fantastic.
That are not well,
because founder syndrome is real. And I mean, I'm a founder, and I walked away because I knew it wasn't going to grow if I stayed forever, it would stay in the same place after 5 years. I'm still involved. I'm still on advisory boards. I'm still on the board of the hospital, but I walked away from the day-to-day operations intentionally of the nonprofit that I co-founded. And then I inherited a nonprofit started by a nun, and turned around a 30-year-old organization. And it's fascinating, the culture, the founder culture, and good for you, because I think a lot of every business should have a succession plan. Every nonprofit should have a succession plan. And if we do our jobs right, our mission will go on long without us. And to your point, so I think that's a beautiful dream. And I think that it also puts you leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of people who do not think about this.
Absolutely. I've seen some of the most powerful business people not ever think beyond themselves. The ego is just so large. I mean, these are famous, very accomplished people. And you look inward and you're like, they have no plan for anything. I mean, I'm not saying you have to have it all figured out, but if you've never tested giving up a little bit of, that power, then I think you have to do it in doses. You can't do it all at once.
No.
Listen, there's a little bit of a control freak in that, because you put so much into it.
Right.
But I think that you have to find ways to let others in and let them own it, and let them not achieve the successful moment that you wanted, as or miss that opportunity just by a little bit in order to dig a little bit more to grow. That's where growth happens, in those really hard moments where you learn those lessons and then you say, never going to do that again, or we can do that better.
Well, and speaking
successes.
exactly. And speaking of lessons, there's got to be many life lessons that you've had along this journey in the past 24 years doing this work. So what are some of the life lessons that you've learned? I mean, obviously you've grown up doing this. And we're always growing and changing, hopefully. And but there's so much. We have such a privileged spot. I always say we have a front row seat to humanity, which is going to be the title of my book, by the way. Just putting that out there. But I feel like we do as nonprofit founders. We really do have a privileged seat to see so many things and to learn so many lessons from the people that we get to work with that other people don't see necessarily in their day-to-day job. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned during this time?
Number one, be a good listener. As a founder or a leader, I've been at plenty of meals or dinners with other people who, they just talk about themselves. Then you leave it going, they just talk about themselves. And like, who wants to be around someone who just talks about themselves? I mean, that's all
right. Yeah.
And, I think I learned it from when I volunteer alongside my volunteers, to remember to sit down and listen to someone else, be it a senior citizen, be it another volunteer, be it a peer colleague of mine. And then even in my personal life, to go to dinner with friends and you just sit and just like listen to someone else and get to know what they need. And when you can understand the needs around you, you can better serve those needs, be it personal, professional, or, your big dream goals, tapping in, public speaking, everyone's like, to know your audience, that's like the fancy textbook way to like, well, know your audience. But really, I think the human, like practical thing is be a good listener. And the second is how to build a team, or building the right team. Because as much as I am the founder, I didn't have a co-founder. My name was, at the end of the day, if something went right or wrong, you can blame it on me. You could point the finger. But as, we've evolved, I've definitely seen when you want to grow or continue, you have to bring people on who are, who have expertise you don't have and not be threatened by it, to bring in people who complement you, that are different from you, that challenge you. So being able to build a team, because at the end of the day, if you want something to grow or make a larger impact, you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone.
Amen to that. It takes a village. And it's funny because whenever I do these, when I first started doing these interviews, long before there were even podcasts, people were like, oh, I want to talk about, the work. I don't want to talk about me. I don't want to talk about my story. I'm like, but we all know that none of us do this alone. No one has ever done this. Just because we started something, we brought people together to help us. There's always been a team. And we're not telling this, we're telling the story, your story, we're telling Rachel's story so other people can realize that they have the power to do this too. It isn't a superpower. Well, maybe it is a little bit superpower because we're connectors. But at the end of
that. I love that you said connectors. I have to attribute that to my brother, who once said, Rachel, we're connectors. It's the type of people we are. We enjoy it. People might find it a little bit like people who are not connectors feel a little odd when they're around too many connectors, because we take pride or we get excited to see a relevant opportunity or experience. It's like, I have to connect you with this person, or you need to meet 100%. This person. And it's literally out of the kindness of our hearts, nothing to do with me. It will not help me one drop, but it will allow them to move forward in whatever success or relationship it is. Absolutely.
And I am a connector and I love connecting people, but we can't, at the end of the day, as nonprofit founders, we're building community. And what are communities made of? They're made of connections, which is exactly what you're doing at GlamourGals. I mean, you're creating connections. So it's just, I love that you're talking about a team, because I think it's just so funny when I had to say to so many people like, no, we're going to talk about the organization on Charity Matters, but we need to tell your story, and your story involves your team. It is,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of pieces that go into this. So how do you think you've changed during this time?
I think I had to recognize that it's okay for my role to change. I've done this for over 20 years. So I started off as a volunteer doing the direct service as a teen, going into the senior home, going into multiple senior homes, going to different classrooms to convince other students to do the same thing. Later on in college, having other chapters of young people replicate the service in different communities. And then I remember sitting in a professor's office, and she said, this is a moment where your role has changed and you have to accept it. And you either have to move forward in it, where I was talking to her about, I didn't have time to actually go and do the local service with the local chapter that was there in college. She said, just reflect on this for a moment. You are allowing maybe 1,000 other people to do the service by your actions. So your one action of going into the senior home, by not doing that, you're putting the time towards inspiring and organizing 1,000 others.
Right.
And you have to see the value in that and not feel guilty.
Right.
I felt guilty. I wasn't going in there. Like, but do you see the upside of all those other people can't do what you're doing?
Right.
So it was that. And then, the next evolution of leadership came along where, it wasn't just me alone. I had to welcome other people in and be okay with the role of, sharing that delegation of power and responsibility. And
right.
Again, it was allowing and embracing those changes in my leadership role and understanding, how I fit into the organization each step of the way.
Well, and as you grow it, you change, the organization changes, everything hopefully grows. It all keeps growing and evolving and changing. Well, I love what you have built and I love following your journey. And I think everyone listening probably does too. So tell us how we can volunteer, support you, get our kids involved, send cards, give us where we can send money, give us all the good stuff, Rachel.
Well, our hub, and I remember my very first piece of real estate back in the day when the internet sounded like, you'll know that, was
the dial-up.
It's glamourgals.org. Go to our website. If you're on social at GlamourGals, GlamourGals as in Sam, GlamourGals. And literally we have launched now it's our holiday campaign. Again, it was our My Dear Friend award-winning card writing campaign to reach isolated seniors. Our goal is to write and reach 30,000 isolated seniors in all 50 states this holiday season. Anyone can write a card. Get your kids, your colleagues, your family. You can design your own. You can download from our site. We teamed up for now a third year in a row with this incredible watercolor female artist, Laura Babcock. And she created these cards, which if you sign up and get all the tips and information about the campaign and our initiative, you get a free download of our snowman card. And, it gets you can print them as many times as you want, but you can also get artsy and crafty. We have a 1-minute video that helps you get inspired. We were just joking today in our office that Amanda in my office has all these great puns for holiday season. And I said, we're going to have to make that like a fundraising promotion. If you want access to Amanda's puns for card writing, an extra donation, join the personal pun list.
Love that.
So we want, anyone and everyone can get involved. They can write together. They can write with friends. You can write on your own. You can write for service. And for every card that's written up to 15,000 cards, we actually have a match. So if you're, so many people during the holiday seasons, maybe they can't give money. And for every card that someone writes and logs and requests a senior home address to mail their cards to, because we personally match you with a senior home. We try to do it in your area or in your state. Each card you write will be matched by $1 donation. So, I think that's really powerful, and creating, community and the opportunity to participate no matter who you are, where you are, or what your position is really powerful. And of course, if you can give, We absolutely appreciate your donations. They're tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law. And you can make a donation by credit card, by check, by stock. You can call us up. We can accept in-kind, unused, unopened cosmetics, or even if it's like Amazon gift cards or, dollars to help us ship the materials out. Our leadership programming that we provide, the training, the ongoing mentorship, and the recognition of our volunteers and all the resources and materials they need along the way is provided by my small and mighty staff. So absolutely, financial donations are welcome and needed, just like any organization, to keep the lights on and keep us going. But I think what I'm really proud of is that people can give in whatever way they can, and we give them that opportunity to choose.
I love that. And as we're in this season of giving right now, when this is airing, and people are always asking, how do I raise philanthropic children, Heidi? How do I get my kids involved in something? This is one of the easiest, greatest ways for you to sit down and show your children and show your family what the season really means. This is such a simple way to start to talk about what it means to give and to connect. So I love that you're giving us this opportunity, Rachel, not only just to feel the season, to help, to be involved, to make it so easy. As I said to you before we started this conversation, my nonprofit task is going to be partnering with you guys, and we're going to be doing 4,000 cards, and we're so excited, and I've just loved learning about the incredible work you're doing and your story. So thank you so much for sharing it with us today. What a gift.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to connect with your incredible community of young people who want to do that. And hey, it just starts with one kind card.
It all starts there, just being kind. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I really enjoyed talking to our guest, Rachel, about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think her comment about the importance of listening was so inspiring and true. To learn more about modern-day heroes like Rachel, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love if you shared this with your family and friends. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. But more than that, thank you for caring, for believing in goodness, and for being a part of our movement. You're exactly what the world needs more of. Remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters.